Galw'r aelodau.
I call the members to order, and the first item is questions to the First Minister, and the first question from Lee Waters.
Following your recent trip to the United States of America, what plans does the First Minister have to engage further the Welsh diaspora?
Well, our diaspora communities play an important role in promoting Wales overseas. When travelling abroad, I do regularly meet people with a Welsh heritage who contribute greatly, of course, to their adopted countries. I can say to the member, when I was in the US, I met with technology leaders in a meeting arranged by somebody who I was actually in school with. It was that close a relationship. And also with many others who work in the US cities and in Canada, who are very keen to work with the Welsh Government to promote Wales as a tourist destination and, of course, as a place to invest.
Thank you. I was pleased to hear that you met tech leaders in New York, including amongst them Welsh expats who are now leading international tech firms. Tapping into the expertise and the passion of diaspora communities has been shown to be an important economic development tool. I was pleased by yesterday's announcement that you have commissioned an academic-led review into digital innovation, but it's not due to report until a year's time, and that's a long time given the pace at which artificial intelligence is developing. So what will you do in the meantime to make sure we take practical action to put Wales on the front foot? And how will the Welsh Government engage with diaspora groups to help us deal with the challenges and opportunities presented by developments in artificial intelligence?
Well, it's right to say that the world of the digital world moves very, very quickly. We can see that. But, of course, the review has to look at all the issues that we will face in the future. It will be led by Professor Phil Brown, who is the Distinguished Research Professor at Cardiff University School of Social Sciences. We want to develop, of course, the availability of good quality jobs for everyone and to make sure we have the skills we need not just for now, but for the future. And it is important that we work with our diaspora communities, many of whom, I met them when I was in the US, have links into hotbeds of digitisation, such as Silicon Valley, to make sure that we are aware of what is coming in the future and what type of skills our people will need. And the review will need to do that as part of the plan we're developing to make sure that people have those skills.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, yesterday students took part in a University of Wales Trinity St David's Tourism and Hospitality Conference here in the Senedd, sponsored by my colleague Mike Hedges. And one of the excellent speakers at that was Samantha Birdsell, who had left Wales after university, worked for 20 years in tourism and hospitality, including 11 years in the US, and that she's now back in the UK working for Marriott Hotels. She's one of the examples of a high flyer, high achiever who's been away and come back. And she's working in one of our main key sectors for economic development. How can we actively seek other high achievers from Wales to come back? And what can you as a Welsh Government offer them to do that?
Well, we have, in conjunction with the private sector, part-funded a diaspora feasibility study that includes 3 key focus areas. Firstly, researching how other countries engage with their diasporas. Secondly, identifying and engaging with Wales's 50 most influential diaspora to determine their capacity and propensity to contribute to the shaping of a Welsh diaspora initiative, and then, of course, to determine the potential benefits to Wales of establishing its own diaspora organisation. Now, Global Welsh, which is a private sector partnership, has been established as a community interest company to develop a diaspora for Wales to support jobs and growth. It's at an early stage of its development, and of course it's looking to draw in further private sector investment. Now, by moving forward in that way, we can seek to find out where people are, first of all, and then make sure that their skills can be utilised on Wales' behalf in the future, whether they remain in the countries where they are currently living in, or whether they bring their skills back to Wales.
Steffan Lewis.
Diolch, Llywydd. I think of all the Celtic countries, we've got a lot of catching up to do when it comes to maximising the opportunities of engaging with our diaspora. There are a couple of points I'd like to raise with the First Minister. One I've raised before, and that is the decision of the Welsh Government not to continue to measure Wales's global reputation. I wonder if the First Minister could put in writing the reasons behind that decision not to measure Wales's global reputation, because I think that is a useful indicator, particularly when we look at engaging with the diaspora and more broadly Wales's reputation as a trading nation. And secondly, will he ask his officials to look into the possibility of a Welsh Government scheme to bestow on people an official Welsh Government certification of Welsh heritage, so that in exchange for a considerable fee and also, of course, a demonstration that they are of Welsh ancestry, people from across the world can have an official Welsh heritage certification from the government that they will cherish. It'll raise funds for the Welsh Government that could be put towards great efforts and projects like Wales for Africa, or giving greater opportunities for young people from Wales to go and study and travel overseas.
Well, the member it has always been a fond of original ideas, and that's one of them. And it's an idea I think that's worthy of further examination. What I wouldn't want to do, of course, is to suggest to people if they want to claim Welsh heritage, they've got to pay for it. But what is important is that we work with the diaspora that we have. Just to give you an example of how far we've come. Back in 2011, we had very few offices abroad. We've opened many more since then. We had no real link with the diaspora in the US. We had no link with Washington. Now we host an event on Capitol Hill every single year. That is an event that's attended by many politicians on Capitol Hill. We always host events in New York. There's a new Welsh Society in New York made up of young entrepreneurs of Welsh heritage, many of them from Wales originally anyway, who want to help us. And of course, we've just opened a new office in Montreal. Montreal is the home of some major companies who employ people in Wales, and we know that we have a diaspora in Montreal as well. So what we have done since 2011 is to look at opening new offices in parts of the world where we know that the Welsh heritage is strong, in order to utilise the diaspora that exists there and work with them to promote Wales in their home countries, and of course make sure that we're able to open up opportunities for Welsh businesses as they look to trade with the US and Canada.
Cwestiwn 2, Joyce Watson.
And 2, Joyce Watson.
The First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's policy on food insecurity in Wales.
Well, the Welsh Government is working with the Welsh Food Poverty Alliance to address food insecurity, and that includes increasing the uptake of free school meals and working with food producers, manufacturers, retailers and supermarkets to help them deliver on corporate and social responsibility.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. At the beginning of February, Emma Llewellyn-Buck MP had her second reading of her proposed food insecurity bill in the House of Commons. The aim of the bill is to ensure that UK Government establishes annual monitoring of and reporting of food insecurity in the UK. I was contacted by Jigsaw last month about this particular issue. They are a charity that do excellent work in this field, and they state that there are 2 existing survey tools that have been validated and could be introduced inexpensively to measure food insecurity. First Minister, what assessment has the Welsh Government made about introducing food insecurity survey tools into Wales?
Well, we are working with the Welsh Food Poverty Alliance to address food insecurity. There are a number, we understand, of food insecurity survey tools. They all collate important information that needs careful consideration. I note, for example, the recent End Hunger UK survey highlighted that a third of the UK's poorest households are skipping meals because they can't afford to put food on the table, with austerity and rising food prices driving hidden hunger. And we know, of course, the situation with universal credit. So what we want to do is to work with organisations to identify a tool that might be used in order to address food insecurity, because at the moment, of course, there seem to be a number of tools, but they all point to the same message, which is that austerity is driving people into poverty.
Yeah.
Nick Ramsey.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, the United Nations has estimated the scale of the food security problem in the UK and indeed in other countries. But it seems to me, looking through some of the information that the UN has provided, that there's a lack of up-to-date relevant data, both on UK level and Wales-specific, so that we can fully assess the scale of this problem. I think the data that's being used is around 10 years old. Do you have any plans for the Welsh Government to collect more Welsh-specific data, or, failing that, to work with the UK Government to see if we can get that data bang up to date so that we know the scale of the problem that we're dealing with?
Well, the End Hunger survey was published, it reflected findings published last year by the Food Standards Agency. In fact, the End Hunger UK survey was more recent than that even. I can say to the member that recent Trussell Trust analysis shows that in areas of full universal credit rollout of 6 months or more, food banks have seen a 30% average increase 6 months after rollout compared to the year before. Now, these are recent figures, and they show us the scale of the problem that is being caused by unending austerity.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Thank you, Llywydd. Last week, I staged an event here with the Women's Institute on food poverty. Jigsaw from Cardigan were in attendance. The Food Poverty Alliance were there, as were the Trussell Trust. And it's clear that the Women's Institute want to lead a campaign on food poverty over the next few months. And there is an issue of women here because they, generally speaking, do miss out on meals in these situations, and that is something that we should be clear on with the threat of universal credit coming down the line, and that's a threat to many communities in Wales, as has just been mentioned. What can you as a government do to work with organisations such as the Women's Institute who go into communities to ensure that they do their very best to support those families who are facing austerity?
Well, two things. First of all, it's vital that we consider the situation in every part of Wales, and also that we should work with the Food Poverty Alliance in order to deal with the issue. But what is different at present is that the level of poverty among those who are of working age is worse than among pensioners, because historically people used to think that if they lived on a pension that they were in a worse position, but that is not true, because we've seen so many cuts to benefits as regards those that are of working age, and that is the difference now. That's why it's vital that we bring pressure, because there's such a great deal of pressure on families' income due to the UK government.
Before we move on, it's appropriate that we mark the death of the former Secretary of State for Wales, Nicholas Edwards, Lord Crickhowell, a man whose vision transformed this area of Cardiff Bay, which is home to our Parliament today, and also Ivor Richard, Lord Richard of Ammanford, who led crucial work in 2004 in preparing the road to strengthening our National Assembly and creating a stronger Parliament for Wales. And I'm sure as an Assembly that we extend our sympathies to the families of both men. Questions now from the party leaders, and I call on the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
First Minister, your government has still not increased training places for doctors, and when my Plaid Cymru colleagues have asked about this previously, your Health Secretary said he would announce doctor training places separately to those of nurses, midwives and other health professionals. Can you tell us when we can expect this long overdue announcement?
Well, that is something that the Cabinet Secretary for Health will be able to announce in due course. We all know, of course, that it's hugely important that we provide as many training places as we can, and places in areas where people can gain the greatest experience that they can, whilst, of course, building on the recruitment campaign that's been so successful in bringing doctors into Wales.
First Minister, we need that announcement sooner rather than later. Our academic institutions and health boards need assurances that you haven't forgotten about doctors. Today, we've seen plans to unveil 5 new medical schools in England, at Sunderland, Lancashire, Lincoln, Canterbury, Chelmsford, over the next 3 years. 5 new medical schools. It's relevant for Wales that these medical schools are aimed at what's known as under-doctored areas. In Wales, of course, the progress on Bangor Medical College has been painfully slow, and we're still now only at the stage where your government has only accepted students from elsewhere being given opportunities to spend more time in Bangor, rather than medical students being placed there on a permanent basis. And incidentally, those universities who work in partnership on this are making very positive noises, which is great news. Given that even the Tories are opening new medical schools in England, do you accept that you have been painfully slow in expanding medical education in the north of Wales?
Well, it's hugely important that medical education, when it's expanded, can provide students with the breadth of experience that they need in order to qualify. And that is a factor that always has to be taken into account. The issue around Bangor, of course, has been well explored. We are keen to make sure that as many places as possible are made available around Wales, whilst of course ensuring that people have access to as many specialisms as they can to build up their experience.
First Minister, doctor training rates are lower in Wales than in England or in Scotland. All of the organisations, the BMA, the Royal College of GPs and physicians, they've all been supporting calls for an expansion of doctor numbers in Wales. Now, we can't rely on other countries to train our doctors. We lose enough talent as it is. And by increasing capacity in England, the UK government and the English NHS will attract even more of our future Welsh doctors. We have fewer GPs now than in 2013. We have fewer hospital doctors now than in 2014. So the claim that you sometimes make about record numbers of health staff includes nursing assistants, it includes admin staff, and it hides the fact that we are down on the number of doctors. Now, Plaid Cymru would commit to training and recruiting 1,000 new doctors for the Welsh NHS. Other countries are pressing ahead with plans to expand training places. Even Jeremy Hunt is doing it. It seems that the universities are keen. Why is Wales, under this Labour government, lagging so far behind?
In December, the Cabinet Secretary announced a £107 million investment package to support education and training programmes for healthcare professionals in Wales.
Doctors!
That represents an increase of £12 million compared with 2017 to 18. That means that more than 3,500 new students will join those already studying healthcare education programmes across Wales. And the total number of people in education and training places in 2018 to 19 will be 9,490 people in training compared to 8,573. There will be a 10% increase in nurse training places across all 4 nursing fields and 161 nurse training places in 2018 to 19. Now, the mistake that is being made, in my mind, by Plaid Cymru is looking at doctors in isolation. You cannot look at doctors in isolation. You have to look at the entire healthcare range of healthcare staff, and that means, of course, nurses. It means looking at those working in social care. It means making sure there are enough people to make sure that delayed transfers of care continue to go down, and, of course, to make sure that you have staff like physiotherapists who are able to provide the services that people need. If we look at our recruitment campaign, it has been hugely successful in bringing doctors into Wales. It will never be the case in any developed health service in Europe that all the doctors in that health service are only trained within that health service. We want to attract the best people from around the world, and that's why, of course, our recruitment campaign has been so successful.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. If I could, with your indulgence, Presiding Officer, also lend my tribute to Lord Nick Edwards and Lord Richard, who were great pillars of improving the quality of life of people here in Wales, and also carried that charge into the second chamber and stood in their respective parties as great lead role models for politicians in future generations to follow. Their loss will be keenly felt by their families, but also by their political colleagues, and we pay tribute to their efforts on behalf of Wales and indeed the rest of the United Kingdom today. First Minister, yesterday it was highlighted in the press that the Welsh Government were thinking about tolling the M4 relief road, and certainly Jerry Holtham's proposals were called interesting by a Welsh Government spokesperson. If the M4 relief road does go ahead, is the Welsh Government actively considering tolling that piece of road?
No.
So there's been no consideration at all around tolling of the M4 relief road, and your colleague on the backbenches there, Mick Antonov from Pontypridd, highlighted only 2 weeks ago that the metro system is very much like the Loch Ness Monster here now for many people. But the point he was making was that routes have been lost because of the cost of the M4 relief road and also the rising cost of the metro system. If tolling is not being considered for the M4 relief road, how is the Welsh Government looking to balance the budget for these 2 vital infrastructure projects here in South East Wales, and indeed other infrastructure projects across Wales, because the 2 of them on the balance sheet just do not seem to stack up?
No, they come from 2 different pots. First of all, with regard to the M4 relief road, that was money that we intend to borrow. When it comes to the metro, that comes from other sources in terms of our own budgets, in terms of looking at the city deal for funding. They are not in competition from the same resources. And just to re-emphasise, we are not looking to impose a toll on the M4.
I'm grateful for the clarity on the tolling, but again, you can't seem to have the two projects here in because the two projects are so massive in their capital expenditure. We know the M4 Relief Road at the moment, by your own estimates to the public inquiry, will be costing £1.4 billion and rising, I might add. The metro system is £700 million at the current estimates. Most people, as I said, would not be able to make those sums stack up. So can you give us some clarity and certainty that you do have access to that money to build both projects, and other projects in other parts of Wales will not have to be curtailed because your capital budget will be spent or exhausted on both those projects?
One of the reasons why we couldn't proceed, or the main reason why we couldn't proceed with the M4 Relief Road in years gone by, is because we could not pay for it out of our existing roads budget. We needed to have borrowing powers in order to pay for a road project of that magnitude. So that is paid for from a separate pot to the roads budget. If we look at so it's not in competition with any other roads project in terms of funding. When it comes to the metro, that is being funded in a different way, looking at our own budgets, looking at the city deal budgets to take forward that project. What I can assure members is that the metro and the M4 are not in competition for the same funding. They come from two different pots.
Leader of the UKIP group, Neil Hamilton.
As I was on my way to Cardiff yesterday, I was listening to the car radio and The World at One was on. And with some incredulity, I heard that the Welsh Government was consulting school children ages between the ages of 7 and 11 for their views on Brexit. Perhaps it shows the level of maturity of the Welsh Government on this issue. And was going to take their opinions into account in formulating policy. I can't believe that this is true, even though I read it subsequently on the BBC website. Amongst those whom I heard on that programme was a 9-year-old who said that she thought leaving the EU was a bad idea because one of my friends says she wants to be a singer, and if I want to go around the world to see different music, she won't be able to because we've left breakfast. I think she must be a fan of the Leader of the Opposition, his speech at the Conservative Party conference last year. Surely the First Minister must agree that this is an exercise in total fatuity.
Does he have to use a 9-year-old to fight his battles? Are things that bad in UKIP now that he has to criticise the view of a 9-year-old? I can tell you that view is more coherent than many of the views I heard from people in his own party in the course of the referendum. He seemed to complain that the news item was a mawkish puff piece, playing on the, and I quote, playing on the emotions of the listener in order to support the Remainer narrative that the nasty Brexiteers are stopping our children from being able to play with their friends from abroad. Now, if that is the level of political debate that the leader of UKIP comes up with, then give me the 9-year-old any day.
Well, actually, that particular reference. Actually, that particular reference referred to an 11-year-old's comment, also broadcast yesterday, where she said that if we were to leave, a lot of people who have friends in Europe might not be able to get in. I mean, whether people can come into the country who may not always do good things, and they can do bad things. But on the other hand, they do have relatives and friends. It's better to see them in real life than Skyping all the time and stuff. Well, it's not I who's bringing young children into the political debate. It's the politicisation of children, which is the exercise which the Welsh Government is engaged on. And is it not inappropriate to politicise children in this way in order to pursue the government's own political agendas?
How does the leader of UKIP think that the parents of those children think of him now? What they will see is a politician in this chamber belittling the views of their children for his own political purposes. Now, I don't know whether he is deliberately trying to alienate parents from voting for his party, but he's done an excellent job so far.
It's not to belittle the views of children at all, but the level of maturity which is displayed in those comments, of course, reflects their age. Perhaps even the First Minister at that age was similarly immature. I don't know. But children of 7 to 11, of course, are not yet mature, and their opinions reflect that. Even though we all mature, and then our opinions are worthy of being listened to, as serious comments in political debate, I find it absolutely extraordinary that the Welsh Government is now proposing to take them seriously. We know that teachers. We know that political education in schools is important, but it's also important that there should be balance and children should be taught to be critical. Given that the Times Educational Supplement in 2016 did an opinion poll of teachers which showed that 88% of them were pro-Remain, and of 75% of teachers, 88% of university lecturers are pro-Remain. Isn't there a danger that even subconsciously, if political topics of a controversial nature are taught in the classroom, that balance is likely to be lost?
So let's see how many votes the Leader of UKIP has managed to lose. The votes of teachers, the votes of parents, the votes of governors, the votes of grandparents, all because he has chosen today, for reasons that go beyond me, to criticise the maturity of 9 and 11-year-olds. We have spent our time in this chamber, in all parties in fairness, talking about giving children a voice. Now he's saying, and David Melling, I heard him say it, and I think the comment is opposite, children should be seen and not heard, which is exactly what the Leader of UKIP is saying. Perhaps he may want to reflect on the fact that it managed to upset many thousands of people across Wales that actually children do actually deserve a voice.
Question
3, Julie Morgan.
I wonder what the children in the gallery think of Neil Hamilton's comments. What further support can the Welsh Government give to higher education in Wales?
Well, the support we're providing to the sector, together with the reforms we've introduced in response to the Diamond Review, will create a more sustainable higher education sector in Wales and provide the most generous student support package in the UK.
First Minister, I wanted to raise the issue of the UCU strike. I know that talks are now ongoing about the validity of the figure that has been given for the pension deficit of 6.1 billion, and Universities UK has agreed an independent expert panel to review it. However, more strike action is still on the table with potential disruption to exams, but nevertheless the strikers have the support of the students, of some of the vice-chancellors and of many of us politicians. So I just want to ask the First Minister, what help could the Welsh Government give to reach a satisfactory conclusion of their strike?
Well, this is a strike in a devolved sector, but over a non-devolved issue. There are two things, however, that it's important for us to say. First of all, I think it is important that there's an independent valuation so that there can be confidence in that valuation. And secondly, as a government, we stand ready to facilitate any discussions in order to get to a conclusion.
Darren Miller.
Llywydd. First Minister, one group of young people who often miss out on a university education are those from Gypsy, Roma and traveller backgrounds, and you'll know that part of the reason for that is their poor performance at GCSEs compared to their peers. They get 30% lower in terms of the individuals who actually pass 5 or more GCSEs at grades A star to C. Now, one of the things which your government has done recently, which is going to make it more difficult for Gypsy, Roma and traveller children to be able to access a university education, is the axing of the Minority Ethnic Achievement Grant. Much of that, of course, was used by schools in order to support the education of Gypsy, Roma and traveller children. Will you consider reversing that decision? What additional support are you going to provide on top of it in order that we can address this inequality?
Well, if I remember rightly, there were 3 local authorities that were particularly affected by the grant. We have made sure that money has been made available to them in order for them to provide the services that they need to. We do, however, need to look in the future as to whether the grant is targeted enough. We know that there's underachievement amongst the Gypsy traveller community, but of course in other minority ethnic communities achievement is actually higher than in the population as a whole. So the question for us will be, how do we look at targeting more precisely resources towards those groups that need it most?
Clear Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd.
Thank you, Llywydd. Your government, of course, needs to be proactive in this area. You're right that the exact point is not devolved, but as you acknowledge, it does have a very significant impact on vast areas of the sector that are devolved. So in being proactive, will you convene a meeting of Vice-Chancellors in Wales to tell them exactly what your government views are on what's happened? And would you agree with Plaid Cymru that the way in which universities have treated our lecturers is entirely disgraceful and unacceptable?
Well, What I said earlier was exactly what the union has told us, that they wishes to support them in order to have greater consideration of the value of the pension scheme, and secondly, to help to bring people together to see whether there's a way forward on this. But what we cannot do ultimately, it would be very bad for us in Wales if the strike were to continue, so it's very important that we bring it to a conclusion, that the institutions come to an agreement with unions and via a settlement with them, which means that the students can carry on with their studies.
David.
Question 4, Hefin David.
Minister, make a statement on Welsh Government support for adult part-time learning.
We made it clear in Prosperity for All that we recognise the value of education and aim to instil in everyone a passion to learn throughout their lives. And we support a range of adult learning opportunities with a clear focus on supporting those in greatest need of our help.
I attended a seminar with the Learning Work Institute last week in which those in need of returning to work and returning to education and developing their skills were highlighted. And one of the issues that was raised was the fact that those people returning to education may find it uncomfortable and intimidating going to formal college settings where they may be dominated by young people who are developing their skills in those environments and have perhaps a different set of skill needs. Therefore, community learning is really important, where returning learners can develop their skills in community settings. Would you be willing to commit that to be part of the National Skills Strategy, and also that the new post-compulsory education and training body overseeing FE and HE also puts that at the heart, community learning at the heart of their mission too?
Yes, but we made it clear in Prosperity for All that we recognise the value of education. We want to instil a passion for education, of course, in our people. And that means, of course, supporting those in greatest need of our help. And that means, of course, making sure that where community settings are the most appropriate, that they are available in the future. In terms of the Tertiary Education and Research Commission for Wales, for them, of course, their task will be to provide strategic direction and leadership for the whole PSET sector, including adult learning, and to make sure that we provide the services that people need as close to home as possible.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister, the people of Newport have been promised significant investment with a new digital cluster which could revitalise the city. Will you provide the opportunities for adults currently in low-paid employment to retrain for Newport's emerging digital economy?
So I missed the second part of that question.
Will you provide the opportunities for adults who are currently in low-paid employment to retrain, that's likely part-time, for Newport's emerging digital economy?
Well, of course, in the course of this afternoon, we will, the Assembly will know more about the employability plan. And, of course, raising people's skills and, therefore, their ability to move into better paid jobs is an important part of that.
Griffith.
With population, we have rising retirement age, and, of course, there are future job losses looming through automation, and the older generation will need to adapt and learn new skills in a way maybe that hasn't been the case in the past. Now, the Welsh Government will therefore need to provide more support for those people at these key transition points. So can I ask, how will adult community learning fit into your employability plan so that we can ensure that all adults have the access they'll increasingly need in years to come to lifelong learning?
Well, we will shortly be consulting on the future funding and delivery structure of adult learning in Wales. We want to look at the current inequity, is the word I think I would use for it, of learning opportunities across Wales. Our vision for adult learning has to be one which focuses on tackling poverty, to make sure that not only people have the skills, of course, to access the workplace, but they have the opportunity, as the member rightly says, to learn throughout their lives. The world is a fast-changing place, and is getting even faster, as the member for Llanelli and others have already said. So that consultation will be an important part of the direction that we take in terms of providing the right level of adult learning, remembering, of course, the amount of money that we've had cut from our budget since 2010.
Question 5, Mohammed.
Question 5, Mohammed Ashkar.
Presiding Officer. First, Minister, what is the Welsh Government doing to improve waiting time for hospital outpatient appointment in Wales, please?
Well, the Welsh NHS has shown annual improvement in waiting time since August 2015. There was £50 million of additional expenditure in 2017 to 18. and ministerial scrutiny will, of course, make sure that that progress continues in the future, and that we maintain the focus on improving the outlook when it comes to referral to treatment times, and also in terms of referral to treatment times, and of course all the other targets that we have in the NHS.
Thank you for the reply, First Minister. One way to reduce the hospital waiting times to tackle the problem of missed outpatient appointments, last year there were nearly 300,000 missed appointments at the cost of an NHS for more than £36 million, which is a pretty staggering figure. What action is the Welsh Government taking to reduce the number of missed outpatient hospital appointments, to reduce waiting times and release more money for frontline services in Wales, please?
Well, it's a matter for the health boards. What I have noticed, however, is that certainly some health boards send out appointment letters which emphasise the cost of a missed appointment. I think that's important that people understand that. And they also emphasise that if people don't turn up at an appointment, they may end up back further down the waiting list. That is the stick. The carrot is making it as easy as possible for people to contact the department in which they have the appointment. And that means, of course, not just relying on a phone line, which might be busy or only open for a few hours a day, but being able to have an email address that people can contact, and then, of course, a swift response. And that is something I have seen with ABMU, and something certainly I think was good practice for the rest of the world.
Bethan Syed.
Thanks. People not turning up to outpatient appointments has a direct effect on ambulances and their capacity to turn up on time. Just in the last few hours, I've had a story from a constituent whereby they contacted the ambulance service at 10 o'clock one evening in my stag. It was categorised as a red risk of a heart attack because of the stress on that constituent who has already had various illnesses, but still no ambulance arrived after multiple follow-up calls. A family member also contacted the police because they were in such distress. The woman had to stay on the floor in damp weather because they didn't want to move her due to that head injury. And then eventually the police turned up, and then an ambulance almost 3 hours later. Now, this is really quite awful, and I think that the person who contacted me doesn't usually complain because they access the health service quite a bit, and they are the first people to praise the health service in actual fact. My colleague Rhys Bjorwerth raised the fact that this particular element of the system is broken last week and was met with disparaging comments from the Health Secretary. If it's not broken, First Minister, can you tell us how you are going to alleviate the pain for those people who are waiting for ambulances? Because we will be perhaps criticised for living in a bubble if we're not reactive to the fact that they are experiencing these long delays and want to be seen in an appropriate manner and do not want to be waiting for hours on the streets in damp weather conditions.
Well, I can say that the 8-minute red target has been achieved for 22 consecutive months across South Wales, South Wales Central particularly. But of course, there are examples where that hasn't happened, and the member has given an example of that. If the member could provide me with details, confidentially, if the person doesn't want to give the... Well, as many details as she feels is appropriate, I will, of course, make sure that the incident is investigated.
Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, a large number of outpatient appointments are for diagnostic tests, where we see massive waiting lists. In December, we saw over 20,000 patients waiting more than 8 weeks, and over 1,000 patients waiting for more than 24 weeks. I hope you will agree with me that this is unacceptable and will get worse due to increased demand in the coming years. First Minister, how does your government plan to increase capacity in diagnostics to ensure nobody waits more than 8 weeks?
Well, it's already happened because the number of people waiting over 8 weeks for one of the diagnostic tests at the end of December was 38% lower than the same point last year. We have invested heavily in diagnostic tests in order to get the waiting times down, and the figures are beginning to show that. Yes, it is, of course, right to say that there is, as ever, increased year-on-year demand in the NHS, but that doesn't mean, of course, that waiting times inevitably will keep rising, as the figures show.
Question 6, Neil McAvoy.
Question 6, Neil McAvoy.
What assessment has the First Minister made of the Lobbying Scotland Act 2016 and how similar arrangements can be applied in Wales?
Well, I agree with the conclusions of the Standards of Conduct Committee's report on lobbying that was published in January of this year.
The Lobbying Scotland Act is now in force, so that lobbyists in that country will have to be legally registered. The same is true in Ireland, and there is a register in London. But Wales has the weakest lobbying legislation in these islands because your government has chosen to do nothing. We now have lobbyists coordinating complaints against Assembly members to damage reputations. Media in London have alleged that lobbyists in Cardiff were involved in the complaints that led to Carl Sargent being sacked. The leader of the opposition has claimed that lobbyists leaked Carl Sargent's sacking before he even knew about it. Even Ofcom, a competition regulator, had to terminate a contract with Deryn, a Welsh lobbying firm, after it admitted breaking the rules. The public are now asking themselves, what on earth is going on in this place? Because from the outside, it looks a mess. Will you now accept that there is a problem with lobbyists here and move quickly to introduce legislation that will legally register them so we all know who they are and we all know what they're up to?
Well, none of what the member has said has any basis in fact at all, but it's a matter for him to talk about whatever he wants to in this chamber. I wouldn't advise he did this outside this chamber by any stretch of the imagination. But it's not a matter for government to introduce legislation. It's a matter for the Assembly itself. And let's remind ourselves that the Standards of Conduct Committee conducted an inquiry to consider whether the arrangements for transparency around lobbying were fit for purpose and appropriate to the Assembly. It reported back with 5 recommendations that didn't include the establishment of a lobbying register at the present time, and that is a matter for the committee itself. It's not right for government to introduce legislation such as this. It's a matter for the Assembly corporately to consider it, as it has done for the Standards of Conduct Committee.
Paul Davies.
First Minister, you have made reference to the Standards of Conduct Committee's inquiry. Now, the committee stated clearly, and I quote here, that they believed strongly that Assembly members should be treated equitably with members of the government. So the committee is recommending that any future changes for Assembly members should also be relevant and be applied to ministers and the ministerial code, and this will be considered as part of the work of the committee in the future. So do you agree with the view of the committee in relation to the ministerial code, namely that any future changes which apply to Assembly members should also apply to members of the government? And if so, how will you as a government go about ensuring that that does actually occur?
Well, 2 things. First of all, the committee itself can't change the ministerial code, but if there is any change in the position of members, then that is a situation that I would have to consider, namely how the code should change too.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, with the new tax raising powers just days away and the additional powers this place is set to gain post-Brexit, surely it's time to bring in lobbying reform to ensure our democracy is as open and transparent as possible. Do you agree that this Assembly must act on lobbying reform now to help strengthen public trust in us and how we operate?
Well, I'd argue that the Assembly's already done that. The Standards of Conduct Committee has done that, and it has also said, of course, that it'll keep a watching brief on the operation of the Scottish model and review the situation in 2020 with a view to setting out a firm proposal for the 6th Assembly. I do think it's hugely important when it comes to the way members conduct themselves, that is a matter of the whole Assembly and not just the government.
Question 7.
Question 7, Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on upgrades to the road networks in Mid and West Wales?
Well, we are continuing to invest in transport infrastructure in Mid and West Wales, as set out in the National Transport Finance Plan. We're also addressing pinch points on the trunk road network through a dedicated programme.
Good. I thank the First Minister for that reply. I'm sure he'd agree with me that upgrades are very welcome, but that they can sometimes cause disruption and economic costs, and it's important, therefore, that they should be completed as quickly as possible. At the moment, there's a re-signalling project on the A477 to Pembroke Dock at its junction with the A4139. This is designated as a major European network road. It is, of course, the main route to the Irish ferry at Pembroke Dock and also the main route from Pembroke to the Cleddau Bridge. Given that this is due to last for 17 weeks, that's nearly a third of the year, would it not be advisable in projects of this kind that they should be conducted not just in normal working hours, but also at night or over weekends in order to reduce the economic dislocation which they would inevitably cause?
Well, I mean, it doesn't work, of course, at night because the ferry leaves at about 2:30, 3:45 in the morning. So in terms of the ferry, no, yes, it is sad that I know that, but the ferries leave around about 2:30 in the morning, around about 2:30 in the afternoon. So it doesn't work in terms of working at night when it comes to ferry traffic. Now, just to remind members, these works provide a safer route for pedestrians by introducing traffic signals at the junction between Ferry Lane and the A477. It's essential to improve safety. It is supported by Pembrokeshire County Council. It is currently due for completion in May of this year. Now, whilst every attempt is made to minimise disruption, inevitably there will be some disruption, but of course, when the work is completed, it will ensure that safety is enhanced.
Lynn Eagle.
Well, we are working to improve child health through a range of plans and actions, and our programme for government includes implementation of our Healthy Child Wales programme, a universal health programme for all families with children up to the age of 7.
Thank you, First Minister. One of the biggest health challenges children face in Wales is that of childhood obesity, where Wales has some of the worst rates in the UK and indeed in Western Europe. So it's absolutely vital that we start to tackle that issue. Now, it's come to my attention that over the next 3 years, Wales will receive £57 million as a result of the soft drinks industry levy that is being introduced next month. And in other parts of the UK, that funding is going to be directed to initiatives to tackle obesity and improve activity in children. You'll be aware that the Assembly's Health Committee has undertaken an inquiry into physical activity of children, and I know that the Welsh Government is working up an obesity strategy which is unlikely to be cost neutral. What assurances can you give that some of that substantial amount of funding will be redirected to tackle childhood obesity in Wales, and that the strategy itself will match the scale of the challenge that we face here?
Well, it is something that we are considering. I can say we've received a modest amount of funding so far because of the UK government's expenditure in areas in England relating to school sports and breakfast clubs. That money has been allocated for maintaining free school breakfast, new funding for summer holidays clubs, investing more in childhood immunisation, and of course looking at taking forward a transformation fund in health. Now, when that money arrives, of course, consideration will be given to how it's best spent. But I do recognise, of course, that we have an issue that is not unique to Wales, but is something that we face in Wales, namely childhood obesity, where extra resources would certainly be useful in terms of addressing that.
Question 9.
And finally, question 9, Angela Burns.
Good afternoon, First Minister. Will you provide details of the allocation of funding for education in Wales?
Well, education reform is a key priority for us. It reflects our efforts to get to the very highest levels of expectation for learners and teachers, and we've aligned and prioritised our budgets to our National Action Plan for Education.
Earlier this month, your Cabinet Secretary for Education announced a £14 million injection of cash to help fund school repairs. This is a very welcome sum of money, and her statement very clearly said every school will receive some funding. Now, throughout Wales, we have a number of new builds, either built this year or literally in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years. In my own constituency, I have a case of 2 schools, one beside each other. One is brand new, costs millions of pounds. The other one is a very old school, decades old, where they've literally had to beg and borrow in order to be able to turn it into a Welsh medium school and to kit it out. I've been there, the roof is leaking, the tiles are falling off, etc. Do you think it is appropriate that every school should have some of this allocation? Would it not be more sensible, or would you consider looking at the schools that really need help to give us a good modern-day learning environment, or as best as we can get in some of those very old school buildings we have, rather than also giving some of this money to very new builds?
Well, it is a matter for local authorities to prioritise which schools they wish to bid for funding in terms of the 21st Century Schools programme. We don't direct which schools should receive the money. I was pleased last week to be in Ysgol Glan-Clwyd in St Asaph, where a new extension was being built there. But it is for local authorities. It is for local authorities. Let's remind ourselves that under the Members' Party in England, there are no new schools being built at all. there will be no funding available, and no doubt if they were in power in Wales, then there would be no new schools being built in Wales either. Yes, it is difficult, of course, where a new school is built, where other schools will say, well, what about us? But that is a question that should be directed at the local authority. It is for the local authority to determine and prioritise which schools and which works they want to bid for.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is the business statement.